I was just with somebody on the show floor who spent like over $100 on like vintage character Slurpee cups.
Oh,
you know it, right?
I've got a lot of Slurpee cups. My people at the office go, "What are those Slurpee cups? From what? 1970. Why do you need them? Because they were super cool when I was a kid."
The other thing that's been around for 30 years now, or almost 30 years, is McFarlane Toys.
Yeah.
And a lot of that power, I think, comes from obviously the quality of the toys themselves. I mean, I remember when these were first coming out, I was working in a comic shop, and I remember seeing, you know, the first wave of Spawn action figures, and like medieval Spawn in particular. I remember just blowing everybody's minds when they first opened those boxes. Is it 30 years, or is next year 30 years for McFarlane Toys?
First toy came out in '94, so next year will be our 30th anniversary. Yeah.
It always seemed like the mission statement was to make the toys that people always kind of dreamed of, and of course it was first with your own work. But now, as you've acquired, now though you've acquired these licenses through the years, bigger and bigger ones.
Look, there was two simple goals, right? I mean, it was simple. I was an artist and I was a collector, and I wasn't collecting toys. And I would walk around a toy store or go to shows, and I go, I don't understand why these things can't be cooler, right? Like, there was a starting lineup. I'm a sports guy. I collect everything baseball, but I'm not buying that because it doesn't look good. They were just trying to maximize their profits. And it's like, you can still maximize profits and do a quality product at the same time. Just nobody... The big boys weren't doing it because they're going, we're selling to 6-year-olds and moms. They don't care. They're not artistic critics. Once I said I was going to start to sell to 14-year-olds, which was the crack between the Fortune 500 companies, I go, what they're not doing is not selling to us at a certain age. And all you have to do is just make sure you're doing the right content. So if I'm going to do an action figure, can I sell it to a 16, 17-year-old? At that point, the answer was yes. It just has to look like Predator, Terminator, Mike Myers, Freddy Krueger. It has to look like what they're consuming at their age. I can sell an action figure to my mom. I just have to make it look like Tom Jones. She thinks he's the sexiest guy on the planet. So if you hit your demographic and give them what they want, you can sell it. They were thinking always kid, which is why I started my toy company. I'd never made a toy before. I knew nothing about toys, but I could see that they were going to take my brand and they were going to do a traditional toy and put it into traditional aisles and sell it in a traditional way. And it was going to be literally right next to Teletubbies and the Disney product. And it was going to fail because I go, you understand that my guy's from the pit of hell, right? Like, I don't know you want to put him next to the Teletubbies. And they couldn't get their head wrapped around that piece. So I went, guys, I'll just figure this out on my own, right? And we did it. And there is a appetite for it, right? Once a geek, always a geek. It's hard for me to imagine that somebody goes, I am a hardcore geek till I'm 29, and then, no, I'm going to mature up. No, I think being a geek is the same as being a baseball fan. I love baseball. I've never met anybody who was a baseball fan from the age of 5, and then at 65 went, nah, no more baseball for me. You die. You're a baseball fan from 5 to death. You're a geek from the moment you become a geek to death. It never leaves you. It's just part of your personality and who you are. So yes, we're going to be announcing this weekend our second part of the series, which is me going back to what you mentioned, the very first series, and doing the remastered version of it, right? So I don't know if you're going to even be able to even get close to being able to see the detail on this character here. And he's going to come with multiple helmets. He's going to come with multiple weapons, just more than any of that, it just looks sophisticated. That doesn't look like a toy you take home to a 6-year-old because that's not the intended audience. I'm guessing this dude's going to hopefully do as good, if not better, than the first one, which was Spawn, and Spawn's my guy. But here's medieval Spawn because he just looks cooler.
We talked about licenses a little bit. And when you got the DC license, was it 3 years ago now? 4 years ago?
Yeah, we began January 2020, literally just before the pandemic. Yeah.
You know, you have the multiverse line, you have the retro line, but the one that I feel, at least with my circle of friends, and maybe this is an age thing, but it's the superpowers stuff that you did. Because just a little context for anybody who's watching. When I was a kid, the superpowers line was was just life. But at the time, superhero toys were not cool. Like it was, you were a G.I. Joe guy or a Transformers guy or a Star Wars guy. And like superpowers in Star Wars were secondary, right? Yeah. But superpowers was such a great line, and it only had a couple of waves, right? Yeah. And then it disappeared. So your superpowers line is, you know, definitely recognizable to fans of a certain age as being updates of these classic molds and everything else. But then you're kind of making figures that would have made sense for the era if the line continued. Yeah. But you even said that, you know, you were not a toy. I mean, you were an adult when that was coming out. So, and you were not a toy collector.
No.
So I want to know what the thought process was with superpowers. And if you have any particular nostalgia for the original line. You could see just like how excited I got about this. No. Even for Den of Geek, this is a little embarrassing.
Yeah, at some point, I went, if all we're going to do is the stuff that Todd likes, personally, we're going to start limiting ourselves, right? And I had to then take a step back and be a little bit more prudent and say, what do you like? And now it was just me watching and seeing what was popular and talking to people like you and whatever else. So when we did get the DC multiverse, I could see that there was this little wave that was happening where retro was kind of cool, right? There was a couple companies that were doing throwback toys to me, that motivated me to start toys because I thought they were kind of simple and they weren't complicated. I mean, you put a superpower next to this, like, what are you talking about, right? That's like kindergarten next to a Harvard graduate right there. But, I didn't do it. But to your point, it doesn't matter that it was painted with a lot of detail. It doesn't matter how detailed. What matters was when I was a certain age, that was my thing. And I have those. I'm just older than you. I have my geeky things that every time I see it, it's like, whoosh, I'm 8 years old again. I get it. So, but superpowers was something that I was aware of. And I just missed it because I was heading off to college. But when we sat there, we go, what about the superpowers? And when we brought it to Warner Brothers Consumer Products, you know, they were a little bit like, huh? You want to, like, but your McFarlane toys, you do this super detailed stuff like I just showed you there. Why do you want to do that? I thought that's what I go, no, because of what you just said. I go, it'll work. I'm telling you, it's going to work. And oh, by the way, if we add just a little bit of updating to it, and I don't mean in sculpting, but like that character should have come out back then. But exactly. They only did the 2 waves. And then at some point, what happens if we add maybe somebody that's from a modern, like a character just got invented in the last 10 years, or like, what if we did a Blue Beetle version, right? There was no Blue Beetle at that time. It didn't even exist, or Booster Gold or whatever, one of the sort of many flashes or whatever. What if we slowly integrate sort of modern into this retro look? Again, we will have to sort of be mindful of it, but it works even on the animation end. Like, you know, you can do the classic animation, you know, the Bruce Timm animation look, but like what happens if you used that modern character with that style? What does it look like? Will anybody buy it? I don't know. You don't know until you try something. And so half the battle is convincing the people we have a license with, will you at least let me try? Yeah, superpower's been good to us, right? I mean, who doesn't want, like, have you seen the one we did with the Superman mobile? Like, I wish we had one here. I should bring one here. Like, when you turn that knob and the 2 punches go like this, right? And he punches it. And it's actually from a comic book. I remember because I collected that comic book. And it punches and it punches and it punches. And first off, it's just so fun. It's almost like, you know, they had those little widgets where you used to spin it if you got nervous. Remember, that were pretty hot for a while. This is like, oh yeah, cool. But even cooler than that is that if you put the Supermobile down and then you put the villain right smack dab in the middle, both of the arms miss him. So you go, he can't even beat up the villain. You just got to move him off to the side a little bit. It's sort of a saying that's like, it's so bad it's cool, right? I mean, at some point it becomes fun, right? You don't look at it with the same eyes anymore. So fingers crossed we'll keep doing it.
You know, you talk about the things that you get excited about when you see, and I was just with somebody on the show floor who spent like over $100 on like vintage character Slurpee cups. Oh, you know, right?
I've got a lot of Slurpee cups. My people at the office go, what are those Slurpee cups? From what? 1970. Why do you name them? because they were super cool when I was a kid, when 7-Eleven first came out. And I got this whole stack. And what's really crazy is that you can buy a vintage Slurpee cup. I buy the sports ones. That was the very first ones that came out. The baseball ones were the very first ones because 7-Elevens were new. This is how old I am. 7-Elevens were new. Has a store. And the baseball ones came out. And you can sometimes go on eBay and buy one for like $3, right? And you're like, what? Somebody kept this thing. It's not mint condition. It's got scratch on it. Kept this thing for 50 plus years. And he's going to charge me $3. Like, I love that person, right? So I have it, and it's like I got all these because we used to collect them as kids, and I've got them all in my office. And sometimes other people sort of walk by, especially one of my employees in particular, and sort of go, he's the boss, a little bit mentally arrested. Like, why do you want a Slurpee cup? And it's like everybody has their thing, right? So yes. I've got my geek thing. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was just wondering what it is. And then, you know, I think we accidentally hit on something with the Slurpee cups, but is there something else? Is it like Mego figures or something?
No, I was right there at the beginning of Hot Wheels too. So like those early Hot Wheels are kind of super sexy to me. But probably the thing that was from my childhood, I mean, Major Matt Mason, that was a cool one too. Captain Action. More than the G.I. Joe Captain Action, because you could put them in, you know, all the superhero stuff.
I have the Captain Action guys coming in this afternoon.
Oh, yeah. No, that like Dr. Evil, way before Mike Myers. Dr. Evil came and you put on like this plastic face. So it was like him before he changed. So he had the flesh face, but Dr. Evil was all blue with his brains exposed. So you put on this flesh mask, but his neck was blue, his hands were blue, and his feet were blue, right? So it's like not very good disguise, but that's okay. I like him a lot. But probably the number one thing is they used to put 3D football and baseball cards in cereal boxes when I was a kid. If you sort of ate your cereal, one would fall out, and you go, oh my God. And 1971, they did 75 cards, and it's the hardest one because it's the only one that you weren't able to send box tops for. So you had to eat tons and tons of cereal. And you'd be sitting there and you'd have like 74 out of 75 trying to complete your collection. And you needed Tommy Harper. Nobody knows who he is. And it's like you're going, oh man, another Willie Mays. Ugh. And so you get mad at you got another Hall of Famer. But through the advent of eBay and the internet, I now have the #1 collection graded, that entire set, as a PSA 10 of that. If you look on the chart, I've got the #1 set in the country. Every card is a PSA 10 graded from that year. I'm like, yeah. So that took me years.
What year is that?
1971 Kellogg's baseball.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Last question.
Do it.
What are you most excited about for McFarlane Toys and what's coming next, whether it's new licenses, whether it's new waves of existing ones?
For stuff that's in my control, we will be announcing a couple of new licenses. I mean, we just announced the one with Activision. I'm going to get to do some cool video game stuff because we found that when we do the big popular video games and you do the characters right, there's an appetite for that too. We're announcing some more comic books. I mean, I used for decades I only did the one, right? Spawn. And now I do 4. So we put a book out every week, but we've got a couple others that we're going to be announcing. And then probably in October we'll be announcing like Spawn's going to be in a video game. He was in Mortal Kombat a couple years ago. In their latest, but he's gonna be in another big sort of brand that I go Spawn's gonna be in that. It's gonna be super cool. So we'll be coming up with that. But it's one of these things where I've got like about 15 things always going. None of them necessarily are giant, right? I mean, the giant thing would be when we go, hey, there's a movie coming, right? That because then you can sell that across the board. But we've always got these little things that just are another sort of brick to the wall that I continue to build over the decades. So lots and lots. We're going to be going over it. I got a panel tomorrow, and I'll sort of run it down for everybody. But lots of cool stuff.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, Todd. Have a great show.
Appreciate it.